In 2010, the Bodhana Group, a 501c3 nonprofit, began a gaming convention called Save Against Fear. This interview with Jared Ebert, recorded live at the 2013 event, is about the Bodhana Group, therapeutic gaming, the convention, and how gaming changed Jared's life. Enjoy.
The mission of the Bodhana Group is to minimize the impact of trauma, especially sexual trauma, on children, adolescents, and families. It really grew out of this whole idea that there are a lot of services out there for victims of abuse and some for offenders who have committed abuse, but you got to look at the whole community and how everybody's interacting with each other. Otherwise, the cycle just perpetuates itself and there's no stopping it. Therapeutic gaming is a very interesting question because I think I would respond to that with show me gaming that isn't therapeutic. Because any gaming, any kind of interacting role-playing is always going to have elements where you're learning social skills and exercising decision-making skills and figuring out what the consequences of your actions are going to be. The main thing with therapeutic gaming, though, is that it is a tool that can be used where I can take someone who has experienced trauma or someone who has difficulties in life or is unable to cope with certain situations and give them a buffer zone. Because if I'm dealing, for example, with the passing of a loved one and having trouble with that grief, then I can have a situation in a game where a person close to the character that I'm playing has passed away. And then that character can go through the grieving process. And there's a buffer. It's not me. It doesn't really affect me that much. But by having that buffer zone, I can play that out and see how it works and see what happens with it and how other people react and how my decisions play out in a realistic kind of setting, and then pull that back and apply that to myself later on. So it's got this kind of tangential benefit. And if somebody who knows what they're doing as a therapist uses it, they can be even more nuanced with it and add things to it to help it have a greater effect in the long term. It came out of a conversation we had at the very first Save Against Fear, where Rich Thomas, one of the directors at White Wolf, who does the vampire games and the werewolf games, I'm sorry?
Onyx Path.
Onyx Path, is that what they are now? Or?
I think so,
yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. He came out to the first Save Against Fear and was talking about things. He mentioned that he had gotten a lot of letters from people over the years saying that in playing World of Darkness werewolf-type games, people had dealt with a lot of trauma because they were kind of fighting unreal monsters, which allowed them to deal with the things that go bump in the night inside their own minds. So he talked about that, and that led to a conversation with Jack and myself and some other people within the Bodhana Group where we said, we're all gamers. We've all noticed that there are a lot of people who got through those awkward years, being teenagers and through various mental health difficulties using gaming. So how can we professionalize this? How can we standardize it so that other people can use it intentionally, and it's not just these inherent benefits, but we can intentionally create therapeutic situations for people. And it kind of grew from there because we're all gamers, and we've all gamed for years and years, and it just kind of the two things in our lives mesh together really well, and it's still in its infancy in a lot of ways, but it shows some real possibilities. The Save Against Fear event came out of, initially we would just get together with groups of friends and have a gaming kind of marathon day that went on. And eventually that kind of turned into, we needed a fundraiser for Bodhana, and the best thing we could think of was to get all of our friends together and see if they would chip in toward a cause. And that kind of grew into a convention for charity, which is something that none of us had ever heard of before or seen. So it was a unique opportunity for us to put together the work that we want to do with therapeutic gaming, with the people that we want to serve and the people that we want to have support our agency, as well as our passion and what we really enjoy as well, into something that kind of benefits everyone. Well, first and foremost, our major projects over the next year or so are we're developing a therapeutic deck building game, which will allow parents as well as therapists to have a set of rules and a card game that they can use with adolescents and teenagers to simulate a lot of the difficulties they go through in daily life and teach resource management and coping skills, things like that. We're also going to be developing a therapeutic manual for how to use role-playing games in a directed therapeutic manner. Once again, both for clinicians, therapists, and parents. And then the overall goal is to eventually be able to open up some sort of counseling center or after-school program where we use therapeutic gaming for adolescents and children to just interact with each other, build social skills, that kind of thing, but also offer outpatient counseling and therapy to people who have been affected by sexual abuse. I was a really awkward teenager and had a lot of problems meeting people and making friends. And was introduced to gaming while at a Boy Scout camp in, I think, 9th grade. And it was one of those things where I didn't know a lot of people, and immediately when you started gaming, suddenly everybody accepted you around the table. Nobody was making fun of you for what your character did or anything like that. It was very much that buffer zone again, so it wasn't people saying things about me, but we could talk about my character, what my character would do. So for me specifically, everybody in my life almost games or has gamed at some point or another. It's an immediate point of connection with people. And some of the best times that I can remember are sitting around with my friends reminiscing over stories of things that happened in role-playing games where, this event or that event was amazing. And it gives a sense of commonality, and that whole kind of nerd culture is getting more and more mainstream as time goes on, but people are to the point now where you can sit down with somebody and mention D&D or mention a role-playing game, and immediately you have a connection with that person. So as a hobby, it's a great thing. But it's also helped me deal with a lot of my social anxieties. I used to be very worried in social situations, had a lot of problems with talking to people, or especially in stressful, like in my line of work, I have to go to a lot of meetings where people are judging what I'm doing with a client therapeutically and pointing that I'm doing this or doing that wrong, that kind of deal. And I can almost fall back into that mindset of a gamer and look at it from the perspective of stats and games and things like that and go, no, this event happened, so I reacted this way, and this is why I did that, and I can explain it all out without constantly worrying that something awful is going to happen. Because in games, I've been through negotiations and different things like that where my character is doing those things, so I don't have to worry about what the possible outcomes are. I know that most negotiations or most stressful situations like that aren't as bad as you expect them to be, and they're not as good as you hope they can be. They fall somewhere in the middle. So it allowed me to practice all those social skills again and again and again, so I can sit down in these meetings and I'm comfortable. I'm not, I used to break out in cold sweats and have huge problems just, ordering food at a restaurant. And by practicing these kinds of social interactions over and over again with people in a safe place, which gaming is, it's great. I'm blown away by the amount of support the gaming community has shown to Bodhana. Admittedly, we've only been at this for a few years, and we haven't put out a lot of products yet. Like, there's not a lot of things to point at to say, Bodhana Group has done this, this, and this to help people. Because a lot of it's all in development, and we're doing research about things and figuring out how things are going to work. And, we're talking about putting together a Kickstarter for the Therapeutic trading card game thing, because that's an actual product that we can do that with. But we'll approach people and say, well, we want to use gaming to help people. And immediately there's a connection. Immediately people go, oh, that's amazing. Gaming helped me this way. And everybody's got a story. And I've talked to people who are diagnosed on the autism spectrum, with Asperger's and things like that, who have said, well, I wasn't able to talk to people at all. And then gaming brought me out of my shell and helped so much with that. Or people who have experienced traumas and were able to deal with those through gaming. I mean, it's the outpouring of support. We had a gentleman from Alaska who heard about our event and said, look, I can't make it, but here's a very large donation just because I want to help that cause. And we've gotten a lot of that kind of thing over the years where people just come out of the woodwork. This community is untapped. Almost everyone in this community comes from some sort of background where they have experienced difficult things. They're often picked on in school, especially the gamers that are closer to my age that grew up when D&D wasn't the cool thing to do. Not that I bet it's very cool for everybody now, but it's getting more acceptable socially. So those people realize how much help the current generation needs and how much they want to give back. And nobody else is really going to this group and asking them for help and support. So we show up and say, hey, this is what we want to do, and all of a sudden everybody's volunteering and putting in hours and spreading the word. We've had several podcasts that have done blurbs about us in their episodes, and Jack was on an episode of Saving the Game where he talked a lot about these kind of things. And so I've just been blown away by the outpouring of support from this community and how much it has come together kind of around us. And it also kind of terrifies me because we have this responsibility now to take that momentum and move it forward into something that's going to continue to help people as we move down the line.